So basically, we're looking at stress, toxins, and trauma. Our immune system is so powerful, and it can deal with a lot of things. And the way I look at it is we have a threshold. So if we have a lot of stress, if we're not eating good food, maybe smoking, other things, once we go over that stress threshold, that's when our immune system weakens, and then that's when illness strikes. And then that's when our body's telling us, hey guys, make a change. Phyllis, you've talked about this a lot of times and talked about, cellular memory, talked about, Candace Pert. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, Candace Pert is a scientist who wrote a book called The Molecules of Emotion. And she talks a lot about the neuropeptides and about how emotions are not just something you feel. Emotions are molecular. And they can literally get into the cells of the body through the little receptors on the outside of every cell of your body. And they know how to get in there. And she actually calls it sex at the molecular level because they know how to get into those little receptors. And then they get in there and what we have come to call mind viruses. You know how when you have chicken pox or measles, it attaches to the DNA, and then when your cells divide, that imprint of that virus goes along with it, and pretty soon your whole body, as the cells are recreated, your whole body is filled with that virus. That's why you can get shingles later, because you've had that virus in the cells of your body. It's an imprint. Well, the same thing is true of emotion. And the same thing is true especially of negative emotion. And so you're literally building mind viruses with all these repetitive stressors that are leaving imprints in the cells of the body, and eventually are going to outpicture themselves, first of all, as dis-ease or lack of ease, and then deteriorate into legitimate disease. And then you've got the real problem. So I always think of the body as a feedback system, letting us know what we're doing in consciousness, what we're putting in, what the thoughts we're thinking, the feelings we're having, the beliefs we're holding. All of those things are input into the body to the point where then we begin to wear it. So Candace Pert made the sweeping comment that the entire body is the subconscious mind. So when we think of it that way, it's important that we listen to our bodies, we pay attention to what our bodies are doing and the feedback it's giving us so that we can correct and begin to put in something different. We have to change the input. So, is that?
Yeah, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
So talking a little bit more about, Jen brought up fight or flight. So back in the day, when they're running from the dinosaurs or people were running from lions and tigers, now, a lion or a tiger is our boss. A lion and a tiger is our deadline. Ryan, would you talk a little bit more about stress in the workplace and just some of your experiences?
Sure. So I'm glad you brought up mind virus. Candace Pert is a very well-known molecular biologist and has done some amazing work on molecules of emotion. The reason that's really important is because your body doesn't understand or recognize the difference between a real threat or an imagined threat. So if I turn to Ken and I say, Ken, I love you, and we haven't met, and I see him in the grocery store for the first time, he may perceive that as a hit-on, right? And then he may have, he's going to have dopamine rise, he's going to have cortisol spike, versus if I go home to my beloved and I say I love you, she's going to have a big increase in serotonin and oxytocin. And so it's the same stimulus, but it produces a completely different biological response. And so our perception really colors how our body responds. And the reason that's so important is because 90% of what we see the doctor for is stress-related. And so when I was working on my dissertation, we studied workload. We studied employee stress. And we were trying to figure out what is the difference between when somebody's really stressed out and they're thriving, and so they feel good, they're productive, versus where they feel overwhelmed and they have a full plate. And that is a completely perceptual difference. It's a transaction with the environment that causes that difference between a stress response and really a thriving response. So it's really what you make out of it. And so one of the things I would say is that if you've ever been in a grocery line, we've all had this experience, right? You go in the grocery line, you get in there, and it says 25 items in the cart or less. And the person in front of you clearly has 32 items. And so there's one of two things that's going to happen. You're either going to say, 32 items, not a big deal, 32, 25, what's the big difference? Or you're not going to stop thinking about the fact that this person has clearly violated the rules, right? And this is true of so many things in our life, what we call gravity variables, these things that we can't really control, but we waste a lot of biological resources fretting and worrying and stressing about. And so in the yoga traditions, what we teach is acceptance, really. The first step towards moving on the enlightened path is just seeing the world around you and accepting what is.
Great, thank you, Ryan. And the fact that my shirt says love, and you were in the grocery store, I would just say thank you. So I appreciate it, buddy. I appreciate it. Mark, tell us a little bit about how, in your practice, how stress, when you see it, how it affects the body, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about prevention of that, but just give us just an overview of how that, just resides in the body.
Yeah, I'm happy you asked that. So I deal with stress often with patients that come in the office from physical stress, because there's emotional stress, of course, as we've spoken, and there's technical difficulties. And there's also physical stress. So oftentimes when patients will come in, they'll present with some sort of physical stress, whether it be from a trauma, such as a car accident, or maybe from trauma from a slip or a fall, or just simple ergonomics at work, or a boss looming over their shoulder telling them about deadlines, like we spoke about. And those stressors oftentimes will cause the muscles in the body to tense up, as we've spoken about, and causing the structure of the body now to have to compensate. So oftentimes we see patients coming in and repeated visits coming in because of the fact that all these stressors are still coming into their life, and maybe they cannot deal with them emotionally in addition. So we do try almost to, in a way, have a bit of a meeting with them every visit just to talk about helping decrease some of the stressors in their life. But unfortunately, a lot of time, it kind of falls on deaf ears. Society's become very much indoctrinated, as was spoken of earlier, with almost like a pill for every ill type of feeling. And because of that, they almost can treat, patients can almost treat a chiropractic visit, whether it be for an adjustment or acupuncture or therapy or massage, almost as a pill, which is kind of strange, because medicine, if you're going to take a pill, up front it's cheaper. In the long run, it's a lot more expensive. So, but I find it, in our practice, oftentimes there are people that get it and there are people that don't get it. And we always try to get people to understand what it is we're really trying to get. I spoke with Ken's dad earlier, and we were joking, saying, it'd be great if I could get everybody to understand really how to really take care of themselves, if they would really just open up their ears and listen, and really take full control of their own health. Because if they can do that, then I would get to work on new people and see new people, as opposed to seeing repeat. So in a funny way, and Ken's dad and I share a very similar business mindset in that there's plenty of people out there that need help. So I never try to think of it as, well, how are we going to get more people in the door? They always come. We've never, thank God, had a problem with that. It's just trying to get that mindset changed, and that's why I love talking with Ken, and he gets it, and everybody up here gets it, in that there's a lot of power right here. It's just unlocking it. So what I do as a chiropractor is I do try to allow the patient to be more in charge, and I try to act almost as a person to help steer them along the way, and act as almost like a guide in a way, for them to have questions. And if I don't know the answer, I'm more than happy to find out answers. Does that help?
Yeah, that's great. And I think the big thing with this is, healers, coaches, gurus, those people are guides. And they do very well. You know, a lot of people do very well at that, but really the healing comes from within. And we have to be proactive. We have to be smart. We have to look at things, as Jen was saying with diet. You know, we have to look at what are the side effects of this medication. When you see the video, you'll see that I didn't look at that. And so, you know, kind of what I went through. One of the things, integrated, I think, is one of the terms, or complementary. And Bernie Siegel, you know, constantly says integrated. So these things that Mark's talking about go with medicine. Nothing is saying, you know, we're not really saying that medicine is bad, because in some cases we need that. Maybe it's a stopgap so we can get things balanced out. And I think balance is a big thing. One of the things Jen and I talked about when we did the interview on the movie was, you know, medication shouldn't be the first step, but should maybe be 3 or 4. So Jen, did you have any, you know, quick reply to that? And then we'll move on to our next topic.
Yes, catching things early is very important. Phyllis was talking about on the molecular level. We actually have neural pathways that have been strengthened in worriers. And we want to catch that very early. And if we can catch that early, the interventions are just much smaller and much less is needed. And just as my talk implied, diet, exercise, supplements before going to medical treatment. And the earlier we can catch that, nip it in the bud, the better. And we don't need medical treatment for many of these issues, even though we know that in the medical world, catching problems early is very important. But we don't think about that with mental health. And I'd like for you all to think about that with mental health, that catching things early is very important. In fact, in the first studies with generalized anxiety, when we used mindfulness and cognitive therapy, it didn't work very well. It didn't do a lot better than just talk therapy. But once we added that idea of catch the anxiety early and nip it in the bud, people did great. So that's a very important thing to remember, is catch it early.